My daughter-in-law Lena gave me a chilly smile and said, "Oh, we already got married yesterday. We only invited special people." The words hit me like a pail of ice water when I called to ask my son Max when his wedding was unique individuals. I wasn't a unique individual. Even though I had been their $500 monthly rent payer for 3 years, purchased all of their furnishings, and stocked their refrigerator when they were going without food. As I stood there in my own home's living room, clutching the phone as though it were £1,000, I saw my son sidestep my eyes and Lena settle into the sofa I had purchased for them. Along with the new shoes and the false sense of being a part of my only son's most significant day, the pale pink dress I had chosen for her wedding lay pointlessly in my wardrobe. Considering how lovely I would look in Max's wedding pictures, photos in which I would never be seen, I had spent $200 on the dress. I had been planning every aspect for weeks. I had saved up $1,000 to give them as a wedding present. To share the good news, I had given my sister Diana in Chicago a call. In the hopes that they might join me in celebrating after the wedding, I had thoroughly cleaned my house with those 4 poisoned words. Only special individuals. Everything fell apart in an instant. I knew it was a lie, but Max finally looked up and said, in a practice voice, "Mum, it was an intimate thing. Very small. Just the 2 of us and the witnesses." On social media, I came upon the pictures. I noticed Lena's parents standing close to the bride and groom with pride. I witnessed her siblings raising a champagne toast. Lena's white outfit, which I helped pay for, with the $800 I gave her for personal costs last month, was on display. Everything I shouldn't have seen was visible to me. Lena called me a week later, precisely 7 days after that humiliation, and her voice was entirely different. The self-assured woman who had sent me away from her wedding was no longer her. She now sounded frantic, almost begging. It seemed as if the world were ending when she said, "Renate, the rent is past due. The landlord is pressuring us and says, if we don't pay this week, he will kick us out. You forgot to make the transfer." For a little moment I remained silent, as I recalled all the times I had hurried to the bank to complete the transfer. Every time I had to postpone my own plans, to ensure they had a place to live. In order to offer them money for their wants, I had always eaten rice and beans. They even had the gall to call me as if nothing had occurred after excluding me from the most significant event in their lives. The silence on the other end of the telephone was so profound that I could hear my own heartbeat. "Lena," I replied with a composure that even shocked me. "Didn't I warn you that I only help special people?" It was her who was trembling, not me, for the first time in years. She stumbled. "Renate, I don't understand," she said. "We were always special to you. You're like a second mum to me." Lying, all falsehoods. Encased in that lovely voice she reserved for emergencies. That was the same voice she had used to ask me for money for the wedding gown, the honeymoon, and the rings, all of which I had helped pay for without realizing I wouldn't be present at the ceremony. For years I felt like I was always on edge, analyzing every word, gesture, and gift in the hopes of winning my own son's adoration back. I was the silent provider, the obliging mother-in-law, the ideal mother, and I never objected when they treated me as like I didn't exist. But the words, "only special people," which had lain dormant for far too long, roused something within of me. I had mentally tallied the amount of money I had spent on them over the course of those 3 years. It totaled more over $20,000 in rent, food, presents, emergencies, and whims. In order to spend my final years in peace, I took $20,000 out of my retirement funds, savings, and the money left by my late husband. What was the purpose of all that? To receive unwelcome treatment on the day of my own son's wedding. I sat on my bed and sobbed that night when I hung up. They weren't sad tears, though. They were tears of rage, of pent-up annoyance, of years of humiliation endured in silence. I sobbed because of all the times they made me feel like my money was all I had to offer, my presence was a burden, and my love was a burden. I wept for the stupid mother I had been, For the person who had lost herself in her attempt to be useful to people who didn't value her. Something had shifted inside of me by the time I woke up the following morning. The hurt of betrayal wasn't the only thing. Something colder, something deeper. I got to my feet and inspected myself in the restroom mirror. The eyes were as worn as ever, and the wrinkles revealed stories of years of giving and receiving love without receiving anything in return. But there was more in my eyes. A determination that had been hidden beneath years of obedience, a hardness I didn't know. As I had done every morning for the past 40 years, I went to the kitchen and made coffee. I didn't consider calling Max to find out how he slept, though, this time. I didn't look at my phone expecting to see a message from him, saying he was sorry for embarrassing me the day before. I was my own first concern of the day for the first time in a long time. I sat at the table where I had frequently prepared surprises for them, tallied their spending and wept in private when they showed me little concern. Something entirely different would now be witnessed by this table. I started doing the arithmetic after pulling out my bank statements and checkbook. I wanted to quantify the magnitude of my own stupidity. When $500 was paid each month for 36 months, the total came to $18,000. An additional $7,200 was spent on food and supplies, which came to about $200 each month. At least $3,000 in gifts for birthdays, Christmas, and anniversaries. $800 for Lena's medical emergencies. They never reimbursed me for the $2,500 auto loan. Their apartment's air conditioner needed to be repaired, costing $600. The furnishings for the living room costs $1,200. $33,400. That's exactly how generous I was. I had squandered $33,400 from my pension, my husband's bequest, and the savings I had accumulated over decades of hard work. To keep two grown-ups comfortable who couldn't even pretend to appreciate me, all that money was tossed out the window. Max's name appeared on the screen as the phone rang. Instead, I let my heart ring once, twice, and 3 times. Normally, I would have rushed to respond, expecting that he would eventually apologize and clarify that everything had been a misunderstanding. At last, there was silence, and I carried on sipping my coffee as though nothing had occurred. After 10 minutes, it rang once more. It was Lena this time. I also let it ring. After that, Max texted. I removed the message without responding, saying, "Mum, please answer. We need to talk." I made the decision to go for a walk at 2:00 the afternoon. It had been months since I had done that without a definite goal or task involving them. It was always the pharmacy for Lena's prescription drugs, the supermarket for groceries, and the bank for transfers. I took a walk today, purely out of desire. I passed the park where I used to take Max a lot when I was a kid. I thought about that adorable youngster who gave me a big embrace and declared me to be the world's greatest mother. When did he become into this emotionally invested ATM of a man? When did I begin to conflate money and love? At what point did I realize that I needed to purchase my own son's love? I paused in front of the door of the bank where I had frequently made automatic transactions. Mr. Klein, the branch manager, waved at me through the glass. He and I had been friends for years. All of my transfers to Max and Lena had gone through him. Month after month he had seen my account deplete in order to replenish theirs. I entered and made my way straight to his office. I said to him, "Mr. Klein, I need to cancel the automatic transfers I have programmed." He gave me a startled look. These transfers had been as consistent as the sunrise for the past 3 years. His worry was more sincere than Max's previous interest in me, asking, "Are you sure, Mrs. Richter? Did something happen?" "What happened is that I finally opened my eyes," responded I. My phone continued to ring while Mr. Klein processed the cancellations. "I want to cancel everything, and I also want information on how to protect my accounts. I don't want anyone else to have access to my money." "Max, Lena, Max, once more." They seem to have created radar to identify threats to their revenue stream. I switched the phone off entirely. As he gave me the documents, Mr. Klein remarked, Mrs. Richter, and I was extremely moved by his comments. I apologize for intruding, but in all these years I have seen you be very generous with your family. I hope you are not being pressured to make these changes. More than my own son, this man, who hardly knew me save for money transactions, genuinely cared about my welfare. I left the bank feeling oddly light, as though I had left a huge burden in that office. I'm not being pressured, Mr. Klein. On the contrary, I have finally stopped pressuring myself. My money was all mine for the first time in years. I owed no money to those who viewed me as a resource rather than a human being. After I got home, I reflected on all the things I hadn't done to win Max and Lena over. I hadn't taken those excursions in order to save money for them. Since I was always ready for their emergencies, I stopped seeing my pals. Because every dollar I spent on myself meant that $1 less might be used for their needs, I had to give up my hobbies. Max's, Lena's, and an unknown car were parked in front of my door when I arrived home. Through the windows of my dwelling, I could see movement. My blood froze. They had keys. Because I trusted them and believed they would one day look after me the way I had looked after them, I had handed them keys. I inhaled deeply before I opened the door. It was time for my new life's first major confrontation. I shall never forget the scene I saw when I opened my house's door. Max had his head in his hands as he sat on my couch. On my dining table, an older man I didn't know was rummaging through files as Lena paced back and forth like a trapped animal. My personal docs, my paperwork. What's going on here? I inquired in a voice that was louder than I had anticipated. They all three gave me the appearance of someone who had broken into their own home. The first person to speak was Lena, and I could hear the urgent haste in her voice over the phone. Renate, thank God you're here. We need to talk. Mr. Fisher is from the law firm we consulted about your situation. My circumstances? What situation? I'm doing perfectly fine, I asked, with a surprising calmness, and Max eventually raised his head to gaze at me with those once innocent childlike eyes that now only showed financial panic. Mum, we went to the bank, and they told us you cancelled all the transfers. Mr. Klein explained that you also blocked our access to your accounts. We don't understand why you did that. Mr. Fisher, a 50-something man in a grey suit with a non-confident smile, came up to me and held out his hand. Mrs. Richter, I am Dr. Fisher, a family law attorney. Your children are concerned about your mental well-being and have asked me to assess the situation. I did not shake his hand. Rather, I proceeded straight to my dining table and gathered all of the paperwork he had been looking over without my consent. These are my private papers. You have no right to look at them without my consent. Mum? Max interrupted in that patronizing tone he had developed over the past few years. Lena came over and attempted to take my hand with that phony tenderness she saved for times when she needed something. We're worried about you. Your behavior has been very strange lately. First, you financially cut us off without an explanation. Then, you don't answer our calls. We think you might need professional help. Renate, honey, we know you're under a lot of stress. Maybe the loneliness is affecting you more than you think. At your age, episodes of confusion are normal. The term confusion rang like a warning bell in my mind. I now knew why the lawyer had been summoned. It had nothing to do with assisting me. It was about taking charge of my finances and deeming me mentally incapable. I was being treated like a senile old lady by the same woman who had told me that they only invited special individuals to their wedding. I said, I am not confused, with such force that everyone fell silent. I am clearer than I have been in years, and you are going to leave my house right now. In order to sound fair, Mr. Fisher interrupted with the professional tone that attorneys employ. Mrs. Richter, I understand you feel overwhelmed, but your children have a right to intervene if they believe your ability to make financial decisions is impaired. They have documented several concerning behaviors regarding actions. It was a gruff, even nasty laugh that escaped my throat. Lena jerked up as though I had smacked her. Like what? Deciding that my money belongs to me? Deciding to no longer finance the lives of two adults who treat me like trash? She asked. We never treated you badly. You are part of our family. Everything you have will belong to us one day anyway. We are just speeding up the process. The truth was there, bare and unadulterated. One day, they would own all I owned. They believed that I had already passed away and that they were merely gathering their fortune beforehand. Whether I had 70 years or 70 days left made no difference. They saw me as nothing more than a troublesome ATM with legs. Saying, "Out." I gestured toward the door. "All three of you get out of my house." Max got to his feet, wearing that juvenile expression of rage when he didn't get his way. "Mom, we can't just leave. We have obligations. The rent, the car payments, the credit card you co-signed for. You can't just cut us off from one day to the next." "I can't," I said, raising my voice for the first time during the exchange. "Who says I can't? For years, I have paid rent that wasn't even in my name. I filled a refrigerator in a house where I was not welcome. I financed a life that clearly had no place for me. Mr. Fisher dropped a folder onto my table from his briefcase. "Mrs. Richter, we have prepared some documents that could facilitate this transition. A power of attorney that would allow Max and Lena to manage your finances more efficiently. This would just be temporary until you feel better." I grabbed the folder and tossed it straight into the trash can without even examining it. Lena began to cry, but they weren't sad tears. "The only transition that is going to happen here is yours to the front door." They were tears of repressed anger and frustration. "You can't do this to us, Renate. We were counting on you. We made plans based on your support. We bought things. We took on financial obligations because we knew we could count on you." "Obligations based on my money," I had answered. "Not on my happiness, not on my company, not on my well-being, but only on my money. I am now a confused old woman in need of legal guardianship after deciding that I would be better off using my money for myself." I stepped back from Max as he attempted to approach me. The youngster who rushed into my arms during nightmares was no longer his. He was a 3-5-year-old guy who believed that his mother stood in the way of his having a luxurious life that was paid for by others. He said, "Mum, we made mistakes," in a tone that was meant to seem contrite. There was a miscommunication at the wedding. Lena was anxious, and I was under pressure. "If you can simply get your act together again, we can resolve this." Reasonable, the words stung my tongue. To be reasonable is to keep paying for your life while you treat me like a stranger. To act as though it makes no difference that I was left out of the most significant day of my only son's life. Mr. Fisher packed his papers as efficiently as someone accustomed to having proposals turned down. "Mrs., this is not over, Richter. There are legal possibilities for your family." His comments were like a blow, and I knew that this was more than just a deceptive family visit, it was a genuine legal danger. "A judge can determine that you need guardianship if you are indeed making irrational decisions due to mental health problems. Mr. I suggest you do your research thoroughly before you threaten a 71-year-old woman who has managed her finances flawlessly for 40 years, who supported 2 fully capable adults financially until last week, who ran a household and worked honorably until retirement, and who raised her son alone after her husband passed away," I said, looking him in the eyes. Lena stopped crying and gave me a chilly gaze that revealed her actual self for the first time. "Renate, this won't continue this way. We also have lawyers and rights." "Great," I said. "You may hire as many lawyers as you like." The 3 of them approached the door with the wounded dignity of those who are not accustomed to being told no. "With your own money, of course, because mine is no longer available to finance your legal tantrums." Max turned to me one more time before leaving, saying, "Mum, this is going to end really horribly for you. When you truly need someone to look after you, you'll find yourself alone." "Max," I uttered with a mixture of melancholy and piercing clarity, "I am already alone. The difference is that I choose it now, not because of your carelessness." I stood in my living room, surrounded by the most exquisite silence I had heard in years, the silence of freedom as I shut the door behind them. I couldn't sleep that night, but it was more due to adrenaline from taking back control of my own life than to sadness or regret. I lay awake in bed, planning my next move like a general getting ready for battle, and if Max and Lena wanted to fight, I would give them a war, but I would fight it with intelligence rather than emotion. I was already dressed and prepared to leave at 6 o'clock, and my first destination was the office of Mr. Weber, an attorney I had met years before when I was managing my husband's will. In contrast to Mr. Fisher, whom Max and Lena had brought, Mr. Weber had a perfect reputation and was an expert in defending the rights of the elderly, Mrs. As I narrated the scenario, he said, "Richter, what your kids attempted to do yesterday is more common than you think. It is a federal offense known as elder financial abuse." His answers both reassured and alarmed me. The fact that they entered your house without permission and reviewed your private documents also constitutes a violation. They scared me because I understood the situation was more serious than I had imagined. But they also comforted me, since they affirmed that I wasn't insane and that what had happened was actually abusive. Every transfer, every gift, every time they put pressure on you for money, we have to record it all. Mr. Weber went on. In order to safeguard your assets from future efforts at manipulation, we will also amend your will. After 3 hours of going over my bank records, Mr. Weber whistled when he saw the total amount. $33,400 over 3 years. Mrs., you could have traveled, lived nicely, and enjoyed your retirement with this money, Richter. Rather, you paid for the entire lives of 2 people who didn't even respect you enough to ask you to their wedding. I had a whole plan when I left Mr. Weber's office. I would change all the locks on my house. I would install a camera-equipped security system to guard against future surprise visits. I would open a new bank account at a different bank, with which they had no contact. And finally, I would begin living the life I had put off for years. The hardware store was my next destination, and this time it was different. Mr. Summer, the proprietor, had known me for years because I was constantly buying goods to improve Max and Lena's flat. "Mrs., why have you come here today, Richter? Another crisis involving your son?" "No, Mr. Summer. This time it's for my own house. I need to change all the locks, and I want them to be of the best quality," he said, sounding familiar as someone who had silently observed my wasteful kindness. He gave me a startled expression, but he didn't ask any questions. It was Providence at work when his son, Ethan, who installed security systems, stopped by when I was selecting the locks. I told Ethan, "I also need to install surveillance cameras, the entire system, and the price is not an issue." The following day, as they were getting ready for the installation, I got a call from an unknown number. It was Lena, who was using someone else's phone, because I had blocked her number following the altercation the day before. "It's Lena, Renate. Don't hang up, please. We must speak like mature, polite people." "Speak," I murmured icily. "Listen, I can see why the wedding is upsetting you. It was an error. I've discussed it with Max, and we want to make things right. What if we celebrated our wedding with you over a special dinner? It can be done at your home, as before we used to cook together." I nearly burst out laughing at how obviously she was manipulating her words. "Lena, what is the precise amount of your rent debt?" I knew I had struck a nerve when there was quiet on the other end. "Well, 2 months have passed. A total of $1,000. "Renate, I'm not simply requesting that, though. You are truly missed in our lives." "Is it my money or me that you miss?" I posed the question directly. "Both," she said with unexpected candor. "I won't tell you lies, Renate. Yes, we are in need of your financial support, but we also adore you. You are significant to us." "If I'm so essential," I asked, "why wasn't I invited to your wedding? How come I don't deserve a call that doesn't want money? How recently have you given me a call to inquire about my well-being?" We both knew the answer: never. Another quiet. "I'll only give you this explanation once, Lena. You have been treating me like a sentimental ATM for the past 3 years. I was used by you. You disregarded me. I was humiliated by you. And lastly, you gave me the worst conceivable insult. You suddenly realize you love me as the money is running low. I interrupted her, saying, Renate, please is not an option. When you determined that I wasn't unique enough to attend your wedding, you made your decision. I'm making mine now. I didn't want any more interruptions on my day of emancipation, so I hung up and switched the phone off entirely. I had not visited the beauty salon in over a year, and I went there that afternoon. Usually, I had to cancel my appointments because Max or Lena had an urgent need, or because the money I had saved for myself turned into an emergency for them. Mrs. Richter, Cynthia, my favorite hairdresser, exclaimed. What a surprise. I believed you had forgotten about us. Cynthia, you were not forgotten. I simply forgot that I should be spoiled as well. As Cynthia worked on my hair, she talked to me about her life, her kids, and her dreams. It was nice to have a conversation that wasn't about Max and Lena's needs. I treated myself to the full treatment: cut, color, manicure, and pedicure. For the first time in years, I spent money on myself without feeling guilty. When she was finished, she remarked, You look beautiful, Mrs. Richter, but more than that, you look free. Was there a positive outcome? Yes, Cynthia. I've learnt to say no at last. My heart pounded for a second, thinking Max and Lena might have returned with troops, but as I approached, I noticed an elderly woman sitting on the stairs of my porch. That afternoon, I arrived home to find an automobile in front of my door that I didn't recognize. Mrs. Richter, she said as I exited the vehicle. Yes, I am that person. Am I able to assist you? Eleanor Brooks is my name. Next door is where I reside. Despite being neighbors for years, we have never had the opportunity to speak. I became concerned when I heard extremely loud noises in your home yesterday. Is everything all right? I was genuinely moved by her genuine concern. Here was a stranger who cared more about my welfare than my own son. Mrs. Brooks, please enter. In addition to making you coffee, I'll tell you an unbelievable story. I explained everything to Eleanor while I was brewing coffee, and she listened without interjecting, nodding now and then, and her eyes were watering when I was done. Mrs., she said, you made the correct decision, Richter. 5 years ago, I experienced a similar situation with my daughter. I also believed it was my responsibility to support her as an adult. I also thought that if I didn't give them money, they wouldn't love me. What took place? When I saw they only contacted me when they needed something, I stopped sending them money. It was awful at first. They attempted to instill guilt in me, intimidated me, and emotionally blackmailed me. However, my daughter contacted 6 months later to sincerely apologize. We now have a genuine connection that is founded on love rather than wealth. Her words reassured me that I had made the correct choice and offered me hope. Do you think Lena and Max will ever get it? We now have to live our own lives. Maybe yes, maybe no, she replied candidly. But that's no longer your responsibility, Mrs. Richter. That night, for the first time in 3 years, I went to bed thinking about myself, my plans, and my future, rather than whether Max and Lena had enough money for food, rent, or their whims. I slept better than I had in years. When Ethan and Mr. Summer arrived at 8 a.m. the following day to install the security system and change the locks, my phone continued to ring from unknown numbers. Lena continued to try to reach me from various phones, but I had learned to ignore calls that didn't fit my schedule. Mrs. Richter, you'll have complete peace of mind with this system, Ethan stated as he set up the cameras. Even when you're not home, you can use your phone to check who is approaching. I was establishing a security system to protect myself from my own kid, but it didn't sting as much as it used to. It was just a practical precaution to keep my newfound peace. And if someone comes in without permission, an alert is automatically sent to the police. I wasn't blind to the irony. I called my sister Diana in Chicago while they were working, something I hadn't done in years. And we had lost contact because I would always tell her about Max and Lena's accomplishments, how much money I'd spent on them. and how proud I was to be able to support them. Now I realized that our conversations had turned into financial reports wrapped in family news. "Renate," Diana said, startled. "How are you, sister? It's been months since we last chatted." "I'm doing fine, Diana. Better than good." Diana listened to me in quiet, and when I finished, her response startled me. "I'm calling you to tell you that I've finally come to my senses." I gave her the entire tale, starting with the covert wedding, the humiliation, the lawyer's visit, and my decision to stop the funding. "It was time, sister, Renate. It was heartbreaking to hear you boast about the amount of money you provided them every time we spoke, as though love could be quantified in monetary terms. I wanted to share something with you, but I was unsure of how to do it." "You wanted to tell me what?" "That whenever I saw Max at family get-togethers, he never talked about you in a loving manner." Her words hurt, but it was a necessary pain, like when a doctor cleans an infected wound, but it's part of the healing process. It was always, "My mum helped me with this," or "My mum bought me that," but never, "I miss my mum," or "I love my mum." "What else have I noticed?" Diana went on. "Lena constantly used the future tense when talking about you. They didn't see me as an ATM. They saw me as a temporary barrier between them and their money, and while I was trying to make them happy, they were planning their future. Without me. When Renate is no longer here, we can remodel her house, or when we inherit, we will invest in the business." It was as if they were waiting for you to pass away before truly living. I sat in my kitchen, after speaking with Diana, taking in all of this information. 35 years of raising my kid alone after my husband passed away. 3 years of supporting 2 adults who viewed me as a $100,000 barrier. And years of marriage to a man who genuinely loved me. I thought you might need some company after everything you told me yesterday," she added, with the genuine smile I had already learned to love. And when the doorbell rang, I saw it was Eleanor holding a mug on the new cameras. I opened the door and she gave me a freshly brewed cup of coffee. "My daughter told me the same thing that Lena says to you. You're like a second mum to me," Eleanor said with me, drawing on her personal experience, as we sat in my rec room. "You hold us in special regard. In any case, everything will eventually belong to us. Mrs. Richter, those are practiced words. The manual on emotional manipulation teaches them." "Do you believe there is such a handbook?" Half-jokingly, I asked. "It appears that everyone reads from the same book, though not formally." "She is made to feel indispensable in Chapter 1. The creation of ongoing financial emergencies is covered in Chapter 2. We chuckled, but it was a sad laugh, because Chapter 3 asks, "When she resists, question her mental health." It was heartbreaking and humorous to see such recurring patterns in our own children's conduct. "Have you ever felt bad about stopping the payment?" Eleanor was asked. She replied candidly, "Every day for the first 3 months, but after that, I began to notice the effects. My daughter needed to work 2 jobs. Her spouse began seeking for additional job and quit playing golf every weekend. They discovered how to make do with what they had. More significantly, they discovered that I was a person rather than a resource. That afternoon, I decided to do something I had postponed for years: visit my husband's grave. I always made excuses not to go because Max or Lena needed something urgent or because the taxi fare was better invested in one of their emergencies. The cemetery was quiet and beautiful. Robert's grave looked a bit neglected because I hadn't been there to clean it in months. I sat on the grass next to his headstone and talked to him as if he were alive. "Robert, my love, I think I lost myself for a while. After you left, I put all my energy into Max. I wanted to be the best mother in the world, thinking somehow he would grow up without a father, but I think in the process I forgot to be myself." The wind blew gently, and for a moment, I felt like he was listening to me. "Our son has become someone I don't recognize. Or maybe he was always like this, and I didn't want to see it. His wife is, well, you know how she is. The money you left for me to live peacefully, I spent it taking care of them. But not anymore, my love. I have learned. I cleaned his grave, replaced the withered flowers with new ones, and stayed there for another hour, simply enjoying the peace. For the first time in years, I was not in a hurry to get home to solve a crisis for Max and Lena. 3 cars were parked in front of my door when I got home, and although my heart was pounding, I was ready this time. The cameras revealed that it was Max, Lena, and 2 other people I didn't recognize, and they were all acting agitated, pointing at my house and chatting to each other. I didn't get out of the car, instead calling my lawyer Mr. Weber. Mr. They're back at my house, Weber. They've brought more folks this time. What ought I to do? Mrs. Richter. Don't exit the vehicle. I'll phone the police and be there immediately. I asked for a temporary restraining order following our talk yesterday. They are not permitted on your property. Mr. Weber and 2 police patrol cars arrived a few minutes later, and as I watched the officers speak to Max and Lena, I noticed my son making angry gestures and Lena crying once more, but this time I was unmoved. One of the officers came up to my car and said, "Ma'am, you can get out safely. Your guests will depart right away." Max yelled at me from the street as I exited the vehicle. "Mum, this is absurd. Your family is us." "Max," I said calmly, "family doesn't threaten lawsuits for mental incompetence. You can't call the police on your own son. Families don't enter people's houses without their consent." Lena yelled from the other side of the street. "You're going to pay us everything you owe us. Family doesn't treat their mothers like ATMs. You are co-signed on our bills." "Mr." Weber interrupted. "You can't just leave us like this, Mrs. I watched them drive away in their cars, defeated but not giving up. I knew this wasn't over, but for the first time in this situation, I felt confident. I had professional help. Eleanor was there to support me emotionally, and most importantly, I had mental clarity about what was right and what was wrong. Brooks, any future communication must go through my office. And I advise you to speak with an attorney before making collection threats, because my client has full documentation of all the payments she voluntarily made for 3 years. I wanted that with Max, too. I confessed to Eleanor after her daughter had left. And maybe you'll get it one day, she said. But first, he has to learn that you are a person who deserves respect, not just a source of income. Eleanor welcomed me to her home for dinner that evening, where I met her visiting daughter, and witnessed firsthand what a healthy family relationship looked like. Respectful conversation, sincere questions about each other's lives, and laughter. This was the first time in weeks that I went to bed feeling optimistic about the future. Surveillance footage revealed that Max and Lena were driving past my house multiple times a day, sometimes slowly, sometimes parked for a few minutes, but never getting out, as if they were observing my routine and waiting for the ideal opportunity to strike. The following days were oddly quiet. "Their persistence will work in our favor," he had said, adding, "Every time they show up after we've told them not to approach, it strengthens our case for a permanent restraining order." Weber had encouraged me to keep a complete journal with the date and time of each of these visits. "Good morning, Mrs. Renate Richter," she said as I opened the door. "I am a social investigator from the Office of Senior Services." I was eating breakfast, calmly, on Friday morning, when the doorbell rang, and the cameras captured a very well-dressed young woman with a professional smile and a folder in her hands. I didn't recognize her, but something about her posture told me it wasn't a social visit. My blood raced cold. Max and Lena had escalated the problem, including the government in addition to private lawyers who had threatened to take action. "Can I see your ID? We have received a report that you may be in an at-risk situation, and we need to conduct a wellness check," I asked, attempting to remain composed, and she replied, "Of course." She produced a legitimate-looking official ID saying, "My name is Mrs. Schmidt, and I work as a social worker. May I enter and speak with you?" Knowing that it would have hurt my case if I had refused, I allowed her in. Mrs. Schmidt sat down in my living room and pulled a form from her folder. "Mrs. Richter, we've heard that you've made major changes to your financial habits. that you've stopped talking to your family and that you've installed pointless security measures out of paranoia. We were also informed that you have turned down your loved one's offers of legal and medical assistance. I recognized Lena's handwriting in the phrase, every word carefully picked to make me sound like a mentally ill elderly woman, who had always been adept at using words to achieve her goals. With all the dignity I could summon, I answered. Miss Schmidt, before I answer any questions, I would like to call my lawyer. This is not a legitimate interrogation, ma'am. It's a wellness examination. Talking to me shouldn't be difficult if you have nothing to conceal. The same reasoning that abusers use to defend their incursions, if you have nothing to hide, incensed me. You shouldn't complain about privacy violations if you are innocent. I'm going to phone my lawyer, miss. I won't answer any questions without a lawyer present, so feel free to wait here or return another day. Mr. Weber arrived just 20 minutes after I contacted him, and his face tightened when he saw the social worker. Miss Schmidt, he replied after verifying her identity, I hope you have a court order to be here because my client is under my legal representation, and any unauthorized investigation constitutes harassment. Sir, Mrs. Schmidt said, less confident than previously. We have family members who are worried about the lady's health. We have an obligation to look into it. Which family? Mr. Weber inquired icily. The same relatives who attempted to persuade her to sign a power of attorney without legal counsel. The same family that illegally entered her home and looked through her personal documents. The same family that lived off her money and kept her out of significant occasions. Taking a folder out of his briefcase, Mr. Weber set it down on the table. I have full proof of my client's emotional and financial abuse here. $33,400 was taken out of her accounts over the course of 3 years. Emotional blackmail and systematic social isolation. It is not my client if someone needs to be looked into here. Mrs. Schmidt studied the papers with increasing uneasiness. The facts she had been provided clearly did not correspond with the reality she was facing. Mrs. Finally, she added. Richie, could you tell me why you stopped providing for your kids so suddenly? Because I finally recognized they were using me. I said plainly, because I understood that I was a bank account to them, not a mother. Because I had had enough of paying for the lives of those who viewed me as a hindrance. However, do you not believe that supporting your family is your duty? I was infuriated by the inquiry. Miss Schmidt, it was my duty as a mother to raise my son until he became 18, to educate him, and to provide him with the means to become a self-sufficient adult. My 5-year-old son is married and more than capable of providing for himself. It's not my job to pay for his adult life. I have the freedom to choose, and I have decided not to do so anymore. Mr. Weber spoke up. Miss Schmidt, do you think it's typical for an adult of 35 to need his 1-year-old mother's assistance to pay his rent? Mrs. Schmidt took a while to respond, and I could tell she was reconsidering everything. After a minute she said, Richie, do you handle all of your own financial matters? I can present you with my tax returns, investments, and bank statements. Everything is up to date and organized. Do you live on your own? I maintain a tidy home, as you can see. I look after my physical needs. I operate my own vehicle. My neighbors and I have good social relations. Are you on any medications? Only vitamins and sometimes aspirin. I don't suffer from any illnesses that call for medicine. As part of our legal process, my client recently underwent extensive medical exams, Mr. Weber continued. She is in excellent physical and mental health. The folder was closed by Mrs. Schmidt. Mrs. Richter, I don't see anything that suggests you are in danger or require assistance based on our chat or the documents I've looked over. I'm going to end this lawsuit. Mr. Weber and I were silent for a few minutes after she had gone. Renate, he eventually concluded. This is going to become worse. Max and Lena are spending money to try to have you deemed incompetent, but they don't need to hire experts to do so. Is that a sign of their desperation? That's exactly what it implies. Can they do anything else? They have the option to sue for incompetence. It's costly and difficult to win. However, They might be able to assign a guardian if they locate a judge who is sympathetic and a psychiatrist who is prepared to testify in their favor. I was frightened by the concept. My money could be taken over by them. I called Diana that afternoon to rant, saying they could try, but we have solid evidence that you are completely competent and that they are motivated by greed and not by genuine concern. She said, "Sister," after I told her my experience. "Have you noticed how far they would go to get money?" She said. "They are risking family relationships, spending money on lawyers and doctors, destroying their own reputation, all to get access to your bank account again." Max and Lena had fully exposed their true selves, and there was no turning back. They believed that I had never been a mother or a respected mother-in-law, but rather that I had always been money on legs. This realization was painful, but it was also freeing. I no longer had to question whether I was making the right choice, and I no longer felt bad for defending myself. They had shown me that their money came before my emotional and physical health. Eleanor surprised me by inviting her garden club friends to see me that evening. "Renate," she said, "these are my friends, Cynthia, whom you already know from the salon, Maria, Carmen, and Alfreda. All of us have experienced comparable circumstances involving violent family members. We shared experiences throughout the evening. What hurts me the most," I admitted, "is not losing the money I gave them, but realizing that I never had the love I thought I had. Maria had to set boundaries with a brother who was always begging for money. Carmen had severed her relationship with a daughter who only came when she needed money, and Alfreda had to amend her will after learning that her grandchildren thought of her as their retirement plan. With the wisdom of her 80 years, Alfreda stated, 'Renate, true love cannot be bought or sold.' She was right when she said, if you had to pay for it, it was never real. I had purchased attention rather than love, and I had funded a false illusion. You know what I've found? I told my new friends that being alone is worse than being surrounded by people who don't love you. We all chuckled and raised a glass to our newfound knowledge. At least now, when I am by myself, I am in good company. That night, after my new friends had gone, I sat in my garden and thought, the stars were brighter than ever. Or maybe I was seeing them more clearly. I was financially independent for the first time in my adult life, with no financial obligations to anyone but myself. This fact excited me rather than scared me because it meant that I could travel whenever I wanted, remodel my house, buy nice clothes for myself, donate to charities that I cared about, to invest in my own future, rather than paying for the present of people who were not grateful. And for the first time in years, I wanted to plan my future. After a month of the psychiatrist's visit, I felt like I had finally won the war, established a lovely routine, read the newspaper and ate breakfast in peace, took care of my garden, had lunch with Eleanor or one of my new friends, and spent the afternoons doing things I had put off for years. I had resumed painting, which I had loved to do before I became the personal financier for Max and Lena, but one Thursday morning, as I was painting flowers on my new easel, Mr. Weber arrived at my house with a somber expression that chilled my blood. "We must speak, Renate. Max and Lena have formally sued in family court for mental incompetence." I knew it was possible, but hearing it spoken made it seem terrifyingly real. "They are asking to have a legal guardian assigned to you. Does that mean they can take control of my money?" My own son was attempting to legally declare me incompetent in order to steal my money, and I sat down heavily on my sofa, feeling the weight of the greatest betrayal I had ever experienced. "If a judge determines that you are unable to manage your affairs, yes, he could place Max as your legal guardian, which would give him full control over your finances. What proof could they have, Weber? I am fully capable, as you have personally witnessed. According to the allegations of 3 witnesses, you have acted in an abnormal manner. Additionally, they provided unpaid medical bills that you allegedly failed to pay, as well as prescription drugs that you allegedly stored without using. However, that is untrue. I have no unpaid medical bills or unused prescription drugs." "I understand, Renate, but they have created solid proof." They also have Dr. Lehman's statement that you refuse to cooperate with a psychiatric evaluation, which they interpret as evidence of mental decline. The manipulation was devilish. They had used my instinct to defend myself from them, as evidence that I needed protection, and they had transformed my refusal to participate in an unnecessary examination into evidence of a mental illness. Who are the three witnesses? Lena, of course, a neighbor named Mr. Davis, and someone who claims to be your pharmacist, Mr. Green. Mr. Weber said as he went through his papers. I had always had issues with Mr. Davis, the disagreeable neighbor across the street, because my friends occasionally parked in front of his house. I told Mr. Weber, I need to talk to Mr. Green, even though I didn't understand what he could use against me. Mr. Green was, in fact, my pharmacist. Something's not right. That afternoon we went to the pharmacy together. I was taken aback and anxious by Mr. Green's reception. I was informed that you signed a statement stating that I exhibit unpredictable behavior when taking my prescriptions. Mrs. Richter, it's good to see you. How are you, Mr. Green? He became as red as a tomato. Mrs. Richter, your daughter-in-law came in a few weeks ago and asked about your medications. She said she was worried because you were acting strangely. I inquired. And what did you tell her? I explained to her that you only buy vitamins and occasional aspirin, that you don't have any regular medical prescriptions. But she insisted that this was proof that you weren't taking adequate care of your health. Mr. Weber interrupted. Mr. Green, did you sign a paper? My own pharmacist had been duped into signing a document he didn't fully understand. She brought a document that said I was confirming that Mrs. Richter had irregular medication purchases. I thought it was for her health insurance or something. I didn't know it was for a lawsuit. Lena was an unrestrained manipulator. Mr. Green, I replied, I need you to write a statement explaining exactly what happened and clarifying that I have no problems with medications. Of course, Mrs. Richter, I am terribly sorry for this misunderstanding. We proceeded to confront Mr. Davis after the pharmacy. Upon knocking on his door, we were met with blatant hostility. Mr. Weber asked, What do you want, Mr. Davis? I understand you signed a statement about my client's behavior. And you're right, I did. That woman is crazy. She's been acting strange for weeks. Can you be more specific about the behaviors you observed? I saw that Mr. Davis had taken everything out of context when he said, installing cameras as if she lived in a war zone, having strangers visit all the time, yelling at her family in the street. The purpose of the cameras was to provide security. I made new pals with the strangers. I was yelling to protect my home from Max and Lena's intrusions. Mr. Davis, I responded, do you know why I installed the cameras? No, and I don't care. To protect myself from my son and daughter-in-law who broke into my house without permission and threatened me. Cruelty was his response. That's what a crazy person would say, he said. He could not be reasoned with. His assertion was predicated on ill-considered cursory observations. I sat down with Mr. Weber that night to organize our defense. Renate, we need our own psychiatric evaluation. I have a colleague, Dr. Moore, who is an expert in assessing mental capacity. She can officially confirm that you are completely competent. What if Max and Lena have bribed the judge? What if none of this matters because they have already decided to declare me incompetent? Renate, the legal system is not perfect, but it's not completely corrupt either. We have solid evidence of your mental competence and their financial motivations. We are going to fight this. I went to my appointment with Dr. Moore the next day. She had gentle yet perceptive eyes and was a woman in her 50s. She questioned me for 2 hours on my memory, reasoning skills, financial knowledge, and emotional well-being. Mrs. Richter, I'm going to ask you a series of questions and tests to assess your mental capacity. Take your time and answer honestly. She also asked me to answer logical and arithmetic issues and administered cognitive tests. Mrs. Richter, she stated at the conclusion, Your results are well above average for your age. You are not only mentally competent, but your cognitive function is excellent. Doctor, why do you think my family is doing this? I felt both justified and sad as I left the meeting. Based on what you've told me in the documents I've reviewed, this seems to be a classic case of elder financial exploitation. Unfortunately, it's more common than people think. It was a comfort to have my mental health verified by a specialist, but it also proved that the lawsuit was legitimate and required. Eleanor called an urgent meeting with all of our garden club pals that afternoon. Everyone was furious when I informed them about the incompetence lawsuit. Renate, Maria responded, we will testify in your favor. We have been with you for weeks, and anyone can see that you are doing great. Cynthia went on, better than great. Alfreda, with her 80-year-old wisdom, took my hands and said, you are clearer and stronger than many 40-year-old women I know. Renate, my dear, what your children are doing is nothing new. For generations, greedy children have tried to declare their parents insane to get their money. But you have something many of these victims didn't have: documentation, legal support, and friends who can testify for you. Her remarks gave me optimism. In this battle, I wasn't fighting alone. Strong women who had personally witnessed my metamorphosis made up my army. What is the most depressing aspect of all of this? I stated that for financial gain, Max and Lena are prepared to obliterate all chance of future reconciliation. There is no turning back from this, even if I were prepared to forgive all that has happened thus far. Cynthia said, maybe that's for the best. At least you can act appropriately now that you know exactly who they are. I cried that night for the first time since this nightmare started. It's out of grief, not melancholy. I bid farewell for the last time to the kid I believed I had, to the hope of a devoted family, and to the delusion that unwavering love was returned. However, something new also came out of me. A resolute will to not allow myself to be deprived of my freedom, dignity, or money. I was prepared to battle, even though the war had officially started. 3 weeks later, the trial took place. I got up early, dressed in my finest black suit, and faced the mirror with a resolve I had never experienced before. My value as a person, my right to exist without abuse, and my worth beyond my financial worth would all be evaluated today in addition to my mental capacity. At 7 in the morning, Mr. Weber arrived to review our plan one last time. Remember that they have the burden of proof, Renate. They must demonstrate your incapacity. All we need to do is prove you aren't. Furthermore, what if the judge is already prejudiced? Judge Miller is known for being impartial. I looked into his other cases, and he doesn't always give preference to families. He is committed to defending senior citizens' rights. At 9 in the morning, we reached the courthouse. Lena was dressed in black, as though she were attending a funeral, and Max was wearing a new suit that he had likely purchased for the event. The funeral of our family bond might have been one of them. Max avoided looking at me when we looked at each other, but Lena maintained a chilly stare that made it clear to her that this was really a business deal. Their attorney was an older, refined man who exuded the assurance that comes from having won cases like this in the past. His plan was obvious as he started his opening statement: to make me seem like a bewildered elderly woman who had been duped by strangers in order to distance herself from my devoted family. Mrs. Renate Richter has demonstrated a noticeable mental decline in recent months, he added solemnly. Without giving a good reason, she has stopped providing her family with any financial help. She has distanced herself from her loved ones and installed needless security systems out of paranoia, all thanks to neighbors and attorneys who are clearly taking advantage of her precarious position. Each word had been deliberately crafted to make my independence sound like outside manipulation and my self-empowerment appear like dementia. After that, they summoned their witnesses. Lena was the first to testify, and she gave an Oscar-caliber performance. She sobbed as she explained how I had entirely changed, how I had become into a hostile and suspicious person, and how I had distanced myself from my loved ones. Your Honor, Renate has always been like a second mum to me, she added, her voice shaking. It has been heartbreaking to watch her mental health deteriorate. All we want to do is assist her in receiving the treatment she requires. Convincing tears wrapped around lies. The flaws in her story started to show when Mr. Weber cross-examined her. Could you inform the court, Mrs. Schuster, how recently you called my client without requesting payment? Lena stumbled. We always discussed a wide range of topics. Could you tell me the exact date? I can't recall the precise dates. Did you and your spouse tie the knot without my client's invitation? The ceremony wasn't particularly big. Is it accurate to say that you informed my client that only special people had been invited when she inquired about the wedding? Lena's cheeks flushed. The context of those words was removed. In what situation would it be okay to inform your mother-in-law that she is not unique? She was unable to respond with conviction. Max came next. One of the most agonizing experiences of my life was witnessing him on the witness stand, promising to tell the truth while getting ready to fabricate a story about my mental health. I had devoted my entire life to this youngster, whom I had raised alone. He said, "My mum has always been very generous with us. However, she has been unpredictable and illogical lately. We think that those who are using her are manipulating her." The mask came off entirely when Mr. Weber cross-examined him. "How much money has your mother given you over the past 3 years, Mr. Richter?" "I am unsure of the precise quantity." "Does $33,400 seem reasonable?" "Perhaps she has always been giving." "Additionally, how many times have you gone to see your mother without requesting payment?" The quiet was overwhelming. "Is it accurate to say that you and your spouse entered my client's home without authorization and looked through her personal documents? We were concerned about her." "You recruited a lawyer to coerce her into signing a power of attorney, is that correct?" "Our goal was to assist her in handling her money." "Do you require your 7 one-year-old mother's assistance to pay your rent at the age of 35? Max was unable to respond honorably. When Mr. Weber pressed Mr. Davis for specifics, he acknowledged that he had never spoken to me directly and that all of his testimony was based on cursory observations regarding my alleged erratic actions. My refusal to have an evaluation was evidence of mental decline, according to Dr. Lehman's testimony. However, Mr. Weber provided the records of our assessment with Dr. Moore, which categorically contradicted his findings. Next came our turn. Mr. Weber initially contacted my pharmacist, Mr. Green, who described how he had been duped into signing a document that misrepresented my prescription purchasing patterns. In addition to presenting the findings of the cognitive tests, which had been perfect, Dr. Moore testified on my outstanding mental state. In his testimony on my mental capacity, Mr. Summer of the hardware store clarified that my choices to stop automatic transfers were entirely reasonable and had been handled appropriately. Eleanor and my garden club mates attested to my increased vitality, lucidity, and capacity for sustaining positive social interactions. It was my turn to testify at last. Feeling the weight of 71 years of experience, wisdom gained through suffering, and courage found in hardship, I rose with dignity and made my way to the witness stand. Mr. Weber helped me with my testimony, allowing me to share my entire story, including the $33,400 I spent over 3 years, the embarrassment of being left out of the wedding, the ongoing manipulation of my emotions, the invasion of my privacy, and the threats of legal action. "Why did you decide to stop financial support for your son and daughter-in-law?" Mr. Weber finally asked Mrs. Richter. "Because I finally understood that what I was getting from them was not love," I said loudly and clearly. "It was a business deal masquerading as a familial bond. I wasn't welcomed as a person, but my money was. Do you wish you had made a different choice?" "The only thing I regret is how long it took me to get there." During his cross-examination, Max's attorney attempted to make me look perplexed, but I provided precise and concise answers to all of his questions. I told him that, for the first time in years, I was in relationships based on respect for one another rather than money, when he implied that my new connections had deceived me. During his closing statement, Max's attorney emphasized that I was manipulated by someone else. The retort from Mr. Weber was devastating. "We have witnessed, Your Honor, the story of a woman who has finally found the strength to break out from years of emotional and financial abuse, not that of an elderly woman who is incompetent. No concrete medical proof of mental incompetence has been offered by the plaintiffs. Their source of income has chosen to exercise her moral and legal right to safeguard her own resources, which has left them feeling frustrated. After what seemed like 2 years, Judge Miller retired to deliberate for 2 hours. His face was somber yet unmistakable when he returned. He started by saying, "It is obvious to this court that Mrs. Renate Richter is in full possession of her mental faculties. Professional psychiatric evaluations confirm her cognitive competence. Her financial decisions, as painful as they may be for her family, are completely rational and within her rights." My heart started to race as he went over all the evidence that had been presented. In addition, the judge said, "The evidence suggests that this lawsuit is motivated by financial interest rather than by genuine concern for Mrs. Richter's well-being." The court completely denies the request for guardianship. I was the winner. In addition to winning the lawsuit, I also gained my freedom, dignity, and right to be free from the mistreatment of people who were supposed to love me. I witnessed Max and Lena having a heated argument with their attorney as we were leaving the courthouse. Before leaving, Lena shot me a look of unadulterated hate. Max gave me one final glance, and for a brief moment, I thought I might have regretted it, but it was too late. Eleanor planned a party for all of our friends at my house that evening. We raised a glass to freedom, justice, and the sisterhood of strong, mutually supporting women. Alfreda was correct when she told me, "Renate, you didn't just win a trial today. You won back your life." The future was entirely mine for the first time in years. I was able to travel. I'm capable of love. I could live a life free from deception, guilt, and dread. I relocated to a lovely apartment close to the city centre after selling my property 3 months later. I gave half of my money to charities that shield the elderly from domestic violence. I started living the life I had always desired, with the other half. I joined volunteer organizations, took art classes, and traveled around Europe. Max and Lena never contacted me again. Others informed me that Lena had secured employment for the first time in years, and that they were forced to relocate to a smaller flat. Maybe the hardship would teach them the virtue of independence and hard work, something my generosity was never able to teach them. I think of the woman I was a year ago on some nights as I gaze at the stars from my new balcony. She was scared, manipulative, and thought I had to buy love. She's dead. And someone who has grasped the essential truth that freedom is never too costly and real love never has a price has been born in her place. Renate is my name. At 72, I finally realized that I have to love and defend myself more than anyone else. You may help me write future stories by supporting me with a donation if you enjoyed my story. I'm grateful in advance. What would you do if you were this person? Please leave your thoughts in the comments section. I would be very interested in hearing them. I'm always interested in your opinions. Tell me where you heard this story as well. Please enjoy the video and subscribe to my channel for more life tales like this one. Many more stories are in store for you. With warmest regards. Till the next time, M.